Today we are going to talk about craft and design markets. Hello lovely friends, thank you so much for joining me. If we haven't met before, my name's Michelle. I'm an artist and hand weaver, and I post every couple of weeks about my creative processes as well as some creative motivation, which is what today's video is all about. So I have had quite a lot of questions about whether people should do design markets or craft markets, what type of markets to do, how to choose the market, and then what to do once you've been accepted into a market. Now, I'm going to start off by saying that I am not an expert. I only do one market a year, and that's the Bowerbird Design Market. I have done a couple of craft markets when I was first starting out, but I'm definitely not an expert. So I'm just going to give you my interpretation of markets in my local area and my perception of markets in general. So if that sounds good to you, keep on watching. So the first thing to think about is what type of market to do for the products that you sell. Now, there's two types of markets in most large cities. There are craft markets, which are usually pretty small, and then there are design markets, which are usually enormous. So depending on what type of product you sell, that will determine what type of market you do. If you do fairly small things and at a good price point, then you might want to start with craft markets and see how you go. The advantage with craft markets is they're usually very cheap to hire a stall. They usually have a lot of people coming through, but they are looking for small, fairly, well-priced items. So you do get the volume of people coming through because usually they're free to enter. You don't normally have to have an entrance fee to go to those craft fairs. So you do get a lot of people coming through. But if you're doing more high-end items, like more expensive, like my scarves, my scarves usually retail for about 160 Australian dollars for the double length ones like I'm wearing, then the design markets are probably going to be the way to go. So a lot of people aren't going to want to go to a small craft market and buy a scarf for $160. So I started off with craft markets. I did a couple of one-day markets, and I did sell a few, but not very many, because people were coming in and looking at my work and going, oh, that's expensive for a scarf, and not realizing the work that goes into it, the fact that I've spent many years learning how to weave, the fact that my weaving equipment is quite expensive. People don't appreciate that as much, generally, not always, but generally, at the small craft markets. They're just looking for little bits and pieces as a gift. They're not really looking at things as an overall sort of bespoke, expensive item. Whereas design markets, people are usually going in with a budget and they are expecting things to be more luxury items, more one-of-a-kind items, and sort of big purchases. So when I started doing the Bowerbird market, that's when my sales really increased, because usually people who go to those sort of markets, they appreciate the value of handmade, they appreciate the value of materials, and they appreciate the value of people's experience. And usually that's when you can have a chat to people about what you do. So for example, at the Bowerbird market, you'll get people who make knives. You'll get people who make bespoke, beautiful, and quite expensive high-end jewelry. You'll get those kinds of things, and people won't really worry as much about the prices because they know what goes into them. Quite a few fashion designers as well come from all over Australia to do the Bowerbird market. So again, you're going to be getting your one-of-a-kind bespoke items. So I would say that's the first thing to consider. What type of thing are you selling? Some things can actually go between craft markets and design fairs. And if that's your sort of product, then that's excellent, because as I said, craft fairs are a lot cheaper to do, so your profit margin would probably be a lot higher. Whereas design markets, you've got to work hard to make up the cost of your stall before you're even starting to make money. So think about that. Sometimes when you've got things like skincare or smaller kind of jewelry items, you may be able to do both. So the best thing to do is do your research, go to as many markets as possible, see what type of things are being sold in both types of markets, and see where your work fits into. The problem with not doing your research and just going straight for one type of market is that, say for example, you do a craft market and then you only sell 1 or 2 items or nothing, then you'll think it's you, or you'll think that your items are overpriced. Whereas in reality, it could be that you're at the wrong market. So that's why I say do your research, because sometimes you don't want your confidence knocked just because you've chosen the wrong market. I get invited to do markets quite a bit in different parts of the state, and I don't say yes to many of them, because sometimes they say to me, oh yes, we're doing this new market in this area and we're going to try and make it, you know, a bit crafty, a bit of this, a bit of that, and we think your items would do really well. And then you do your research and then you kind of think, you know what, you're having a lot of produce there, you're having a lot of food stalls, you've got a lot of, you know, small items. My items I don't think would sell that well. It's great to be invited to these things, and it is great to get your work out there, but there's a fine line between taking a lot of your time setting up, being at your stall the whole day, obviously when you're there having to buy food, you know, because unless you bring your own, but usually it's easier just to grab things on the run. So you have to really analyse how much time you have to spare. For me, I work full time as well, so I'm very, very careful with what markets I do, because usually I have to take time off work to do them. And then I've done, like this weekend, I just did the Bowerbird market, and that was 3 full days. So I had to take the day before off. I've taken the Monday off to recover, and then, you know, but for me it was worth it because I made quite a lot of money over the weekend. So that's why the best thing to do is to research first. If you're in a small area, you may also find it good to travel to do markets. The market I just did, there were a lot of designers from Melbourne, because they travel from Melbourne to Adelaide to do the Bowerbird market. And for them it's worth it, because I think Melbourne's a 7-hour drive away. It's not really close, but you know, it's close enough that it can make it worthwhile. So our next door stall holders, I think 3 of them across were all from Melbourne. We were the only South Australian in our particular area. So they all came over. For them it was worth the stall fee, the travel costs, the accommodation costs, and they still made money from Bowerbird because, yeah, their products were really good. And they have said to me that Bowerbird is a little bit cheaper than the eastern states markets, but has just the same amount of people coming through for them. So it's worth their while to travel to Adelaide. So if you're in a small area, it may be worth your while travelling to a different market if you think it's financially viable for you to do so. Also, the big design markets, there's normally a very stringent application process to get in. So the reason they do that is because those big design markets are very curated. They don't want a million of the same stall. They want people to be as different as possible, and so they do have a very curated process. So the Bowerbird market, there's about 140 stalls, I think, this time around. And yeah, you do an application about 6 months before. They review all the applicants because they want to have a particular level of designers. They want a particular sort of vibe for their market. So if they feel that you fit, then they'll put you into their market. They're not going to accept everyone. I do know a lot of people who don't get into those markets. And I think some in the eastern states are even more competitive because they've got a higher population than we do. So yeah, don't get disheartened if you don't get accepted into these design fairs. It also depends on what you're selling. Because I'm a weaver and there aren't very many weavers, I do have an advantage in that I do something quite unique. But say if you make jewellery or ceramics or candles, you are going to struggle a little bit because you're going to have a lot of competition from people wanting to sell there. Although I must say, this year at Bowerbird, the overwhelming stall was gin. I think someone said there were 15 gin stalls. I mean, I know gin's very trendy here in Australia right now, but wow, that's a lot of gin. So in the old days, it used to be candles or jewellery, but it's gin now. So, hey, so yeah, there is a very stringent process to go through for application. So the way to get through with those is to make sure that when you're doing your application, to make sure that you point out to them how unique you are, what's your point of difference. Why should you be chosen over, say, another maker that's similar to you? So that's the key to getting into those design markets. So okay, you've chosen your market, you've been accepted into a market. What do I do now? Now, market display and setup is really not my forte. My setup is actually pretty basic and I want to up-level my own setup. I did get some market stall furniture a couple of years ago. I invested in that. But I've just got a clothing rack and I've just got my backing signage and I've woven some panels to go on there as well. But I think next year I'm going to level that up. And you know what I'm going to tell you about the display? Have a look around at other markets, see what other people do. Because when I first started doing markets, which probably was about, say, 6 years ago, the trend was to have tables with tablecloths on them, and then you had things on the table. These days, that's kind of not sort of fashionable anymore at markets. People are having more open shelving, and they're having more bespoke furniture to have for their stall. So fashions do change in markets, and so when you get one display, you're probably not going to have it forever. You'll probably be kind of changing it around every year to suit what you want to portray at that particular time. So mine started off with everything on a table, and the last couple of years I've had no table at all. I've just had a little coffee table for my mirror, and then I've had some open shelving and a clothing rail. I think next year I might actually start thinking about painting the backing cardboard to make it a little bit more, you know, in your face. But the thing is, there's no hard and fast rules. Bowerbird do not let you have those corporate sort of style sign banners. They really hate them. So you need to get different types of banners. I've got a core flute one that I think Bowerbird actually gave me for free when I did a bit of a little pop-up market for Bowerbird a couple of years ago. And I still use that, and I think it's looking a bit worse for wear. I'm looking at it now. So I might get a new one for next year. But you don't have to spend a lot of money, but it is really good getting a high quality image so you can get things printed on like core flute or cardboard or like a poster. But have a look around, look on Instagram, because Instagram's fabulous for market stall setup. You can go onto the market's Instagram themselves. They'll have lots of stories of their vendors at the market, see how they're set up. If you do things like small items like jewellery or tiny little display items, have a look to see how they display them, because you can probably get lots of little display boxes from places like IKEA or Kmart if you're in Australia. And you don't have to spend a lot of money on setup. But you know, being creative people, we should be able to find creative ways to display what we do. If you're an artist, you can use the back wall to display your artwork. So just get creative and come up with new ideas. So because I do scarves, I like to hang my scarves on coat hangers, but I also like to have them rolled on shelves as well. So yeah, there's no hard and fast rule, but you can find plenty of inspiration on Instagram or on Pinterest. I've also been asked how much stock to take when you're doing a market, and my answer is as much as possible. If you're doing a market that's not in your hometown, then obviously what you bring is what you can sell. But if you're from your home state, you can go home and get more items, that's ideal. With me, I just wove as much as possible. I just tried to have as much stock as I possibly could. It's better to have too much stock than not enough, because obviously you don't know how much you're going to sell, you don't know what's going to sell first, and to be honest, I can't tell year by year what's my most popular item. So just do as much as possible, bring as much as possible, and I know that some people have heavier items than others. I'm lucky I do textiles, so I can just fit as much as possible in my display. So again, I don't have a hard and fast answer for you there, but as much as you possibly can. Now that's all I really wanted to say in this video. I hope it was helpful. I mean, I can't give you definite answers to a lot of these questions. It's more about research and looking around at what other people are doing and finding your own way, like being creative, finding your own way of displaying items, finding the best market for you. And all businesses are different. Like when I go to Bowerbird and chat to other stall holders, some people do lots and lots of markets. Like one I was talking to just does a market every 2 weeks, which to me sounds horrifying because I find markets a bit full on. exhausting. So I just do one a year. I just do the Bowerbird Design Market every May, well, as long as I keep getting in, I have so far, but every May. And yeah, that's enough for me. But some people, especially if it's their living, they like to do them all the time because people do love to buy things in person rather than buying online. So that's just the way it is. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me for this video. And I don't know if I've given you a lot of information, so leave comments to let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to answer. I can always do a part 2 if I've missed a lot. Otherwise, we can have a chat in the comments. So until my next video, bye.